Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of Sreshtha, Purposefully Passionate about Domestic Abuse Awareness. In this series, my intent is to raise awareness in respect of mental and emotional abuse. Everyone knows what physical abuse is, but persons don't easily recognize when they're in an emotionally or mentally abusive relationship. Today, we have an episode with a professional, Mrs. Denise Jittan-Johnson. Denise was with us last week and we learned so much. She introduced new concepts into this series, such as battering, which I didn't speak to before, and spiritual abuse, again, which I didn't highlight before, but I actually had a survivor speak to that. So I'm really excited to have her back today. Just to give you a little bit of her bio, Mrs. Jittan-Johnson obtained her Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from the College of St. Benedict, Minnesota, USA, and her Master of Science degree in Clinical Psychology from the University of the West Indies. She has additional training from the Trauma Institute and Child Trauma Institute in EDMR, PC, and EFT. Mrs. Jittan-Johnson is a member of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists and a past member of the executive, having held the position of Assistant Secretary in 2017. So welcome back, Denise. Thank you so much again for taking your time to talk with us.
Thank you so much for having me again. So yes, and thank you for all of the work that you're doing in putting this program together.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot coming from you who have been working in this for so long. I am just a couple of years. But okay, so last time, if you missed it, go back and watch that episode. That is episode 8. We spoke about what is abuse, the different types of abuse. We even spoke about narcissism and trauma bonded relationships. And today we're going to start by talking about what a healthy relationship really looks like. So sometimes we really don't know the difference between what is unhealthy and what is abusive, or what is toxic and what is, maybe we could work through this. So I'm going to ask Denise to start there.
Mm-hmm. So thank you so much. So really and truly, sometimes just as a society, we tend to normalize certain traits and certain relationship agreements that are really toxic, is that certain behaviors become the norm, this expectation that it's all right for you to be berating your loved one in public. It's all right for you to be talking bad behind their back or not supporting them, or, being verbally abusive. It's all right for you to be going through the other person's phone and violating their rights and their personal privacy. And some of these things are generally seen as okay. We kind of let it pass and things that are normal. But when it comes to thinking about what are some true signs of happy, healthy relationships, are these things of mutual trust. Yeah. The space of being able to not only trust the person to not treat you in a bad way, but also trust your partner, that your partner has your best interests at heart. Yeah. It's this space of being able to let your hair down and be free to be yourself around this person. If it is that you think that, oh, I can't let this person know X, or, I have to sneak in the shopping that I just got because I don't want them to know about how much money I spent. Those are little signs that things may not be as healthy as they could be. It's not necessarily signs of abuse or anything, but just thinking of relationship health. So you see that freedom to be yourself, this mutual respect, this mutual trust that you aren't going to be violating me in any ways. If you find yourself wanting similar things in life, having similar goals and, having a concerted effort toward working toward them in a meaningful way and moving forward together. Yeah. And being able to have healthy arguments and disagreements, because no relationship is void of disagreements. Every single relationship that you are in is going to have some level of discord at some point. But it's about being able to manage it in a way that is mutually respectful. If it is that you can voice your feelings without being put down, without those feelings being invalidated. If it is that you can point out things about the other person that you might not necessarily like, and then have it received in a way that's not aggressive or antagonistic. And being able to come together to a mutual compromise of how this challenge, this discord, this problem could be resolved. Yeah. On the flip side of that is if you can't have healthy arguments, if it is that you feel like if your points of view are never heard, if it is that there aren't ever real solutions to the problem, we just ignore it for long enough until we both forget that we were angry and then kind of move on with life. So if it is that problems are going unresolved, that's creating this cycle. Because if there's an unresolved problem, chances are it's going to rear its head again, and it's going to cycle through again. So thinking about those relationship green flags, and then seeing how things measure up. Now, just because they're an absence of green flags doesn't mean that it's necessarily an abusive relationship, but it should be things that you would want to strive to in having a healthy relationship.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because in our culture, as you said, like going through someone's phone is almost, I have to get his phone, is almost, and even if you leave it, the minute you think something is wrong, women, unfortunately, and I don't want to stereotype anybody, but that's kind of what we want to do. We want to get the phone. Mm-hmm. And even wanting to get it is telling you that something is off with this relationship. You really don't need to see what's in the phone, but the fact that you can't trust the person, that you need the phone, is very telling. And even talked about in public, berating or nagging. Nagging is something else that we accept, that, she, that's how she nags me or whatever. And I know I'm kind of flipping the conversation to man, woman. But again, it's not healthy. It's not a healthy thing to be a part of. And I like that you introduced, again, something that is new for me, the concept of green flags, which are the good things to look for in your relationship, to tell that it is in fact healthy. And the fact that, two persons could talk about it, and giving criticism is also an art. Receiving criticism also speaks to level of maturity, because you can say something that, because of the way in which it is said, it really offends the person. And I know about these things because we talk a lot about these things in my corporate life. As a manager, we have to learn how to speak. They call it like with radical candor, or learn how to give constructive criticism so that the person on the other end is able to receive it without thinking you're attacking them. And it's the same kind of play within a relationship, because you don't want to offend your partner, but you need to speak about those things that make you uncomfortable or make you uneasy. So thank you so much for speaking about that and relating it to how it can be, as opposed to unhealthy, and move to toxic, because that is something else. Like I myself wondered that, how do you know the difference between the unhealthy and the toxic? So thank you for sharing that. And while we under the healthy relationships or the unhealthy relationships, sometimes persons think that staying together in this unhealthy relationship is going to benefit the children. And even generally in society, once you say you are getting divorced and you have a child, they look at the first thing they ask, well, what about the children? And for me, like when I was deciding to go through my divorce, it was for a better future for her. Actually, it was because I didn't want her in a home where I was constantly unhappy, because I didn't want her to think, well, it's okay when she reaches the age where she gets a boyfriend. I didn't want her to think that, well, it's okay for me to just be unhappy. I want her to live the best life possible. And I wanted to live, just as you said, free and comfortable with her partner, to trust him and to do the things that she wants, and he could do what he needs to, and together they respect each other. So I would like you to talk a little bit about that. staying in a relationship, unhealthy relationship or abusive relationship for the children.
Yeah. And I think you already did it. Good job. Good summary. No, I'm teasing. But yeah, it's this, you see this idea of staying together for the children. It's thinking, what is this relationship teaching my child about what to accept for themselves? And if it is an unhealthy space and a space that you wouldn't want your child to be treated in this way, or you wouldn't want your child to treat anybody else in this way, then you have to really consider that space is children learn through what they observe. And no matter how much you might say with words what you would hope for them, really and truly where the learning happens is through observation. Yeah. And if it is that they are in a space that is not healthy, that is what they're going to learn to be able to replicate in their own lives as they get older. And then just this flip side of a lot of times when I speak to persons who have been in abusive spaces, is that they believe in such a big way that they're shielding their kids from what's going on. They think that, okay, because my child isn't necessarily seeing the abuse or they're not hearing the abuse, children are very perceptive. Their intuition is on point. There's nothing clouding their space when it comes to being able to sense that something is different and something is wrong. And a lot of times when we have children who are shielded in such a big way and they don't know what's going on, if we're talking about these less overt forms of abuse, this emotional abuse, psychological abuse, gaslighting, those kind of things that they may not necessarily see, but they know that something is wrong, a lot of times younger children tend to internalize that blame. They tend to think, oh, well, daddy may be upset because I asked for extra money for this school trip that we have. Mommy might be sad because I didn't eat all of my dinner or I gave a fuss this evening. So they really start to make up stories to explain what is causing this experience, this negative experience. And then that self-blame, that confusion, that space is ultimately unhealthy, is that we never want our little ones to think that they are to blame for this uncomfortable tension that's existing in the home. Yeah. So thinking about what the long-term effects of that internalization, thinking about what that would teach them about their own sense of self and agency and own mental health and well-being as they're going forward and living their lives as adults, it's going to have effect on their future interactions and their future sense of self too. So if it is that it's going to be a healthier space, separate, then that is an ideal space. On the other side of that is thinking about creating a healthy splits, is that there is a way to separate from a marriage, but still have a healthy relationship and a healthy space with both parents. And it's about being able to, even in spaces where one partner may have been abusive toward the other partner, if they have a relationship with their child that is a solid one, that the child genuinely has love and affection and care, and there's no question about the child's safety when interacting with this parent, then as safe as possible as it could happen, maintaining some level of communication and relationship with the other parent is one of the most healthy spaces, even if it's not full joint liberal kind of access agreements, but having some sort of connection with the other parent if it is that they're safe in that space. thinking about creating safety in interactions between the parents. If there has been an abusive space, is this idea of not co-parenting, because co-parenting is this idea of joint decision making and togetherness while being two separate households. But this idea of parallel parenting is that we are parenting this child or these children together, but our interactions don't cross. So that means that you don't have any reason to communicate with one another, because that might be a dangerous situation for one party. But knowing the parameters and the rules around interaction. So you have clear guidelines, is that, okay, phone calls happen at a certain time on a certain day, or pickups are facilitated from another trusted adult, so I don't have to interact with you or see you, but you still have access. So there are a whole lot of different ways of how this could look for different situations. And I think that that's where having some level of professional guidance and figuring out how could this work for my family and how can it continue to be safe for both myself, my children, and having a good plan of moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah, that is really interesting how you put that. In the beginning, you were talking about little children internalizing what is going on and sort of creating blame, like thinking it's their fault. And I actually had a survivor in episode 6 talk about how she used to gaslight herself, because she used to think that whatever. So she from small, they were mentally abused. Her parents had a really bad divorce. And so she went on and she married this person who continued to make her feel unworthy. And she said she just used to, whatever happened, used to make up things or reasons as why it was her fault. Mm-hmm. And the comment she made in the episode is that she used to gaslight herself. Mm-hmm. And from your explanation just now it kind of made it real how that could actually happen. Mm-hmm. And for us, with respect to parenting, sometimes even the co-parenting, from what I've seen, is difficult because it's still kind of one person trying and the other person is sort of like kind of whenever, but like for me, it is still, you're not in the space 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. But as opposed to when you are separate, the child may be in that space less amount of time. Mm-hmm. And it's not the family together, is the parent and the child. So they get that interaction and the child mm-hmm. get that love that they want, because mm-hmm. no matter what's going on between the parents, the child wants, unless mm-hmm. it's dangerous to the child wants the other parent as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, right. My other question was, are children happier, or do they always want their parents to be together? Or is it at some point in time they realize that the separation is for good reason?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think that that's a really individual question, in that I really think that younger children tend to have this fantasized belief of, parents coming back together and things being okay. But then I think as time goes along and they start seeing that, mommy and daddy do seem happier, is that, they are able to tolerate each other a lot better than when we were living together. And they start to see how things can flow a little bit easier. They may come to this space of realizing, all right, maybe this is a good thing. Some kids, they might have a harder time with that transition. And again, that's another space where professional help could be of some assistance, is that if you genuinely see that your child is struggling and you're struggling with being able to help them to transition into this new phase of the family, then yeah, having professional help would definitely be helpful. I could speak to my experience a little bit now. I never knew my parents together at all. I think they would have divorced, separated before I was 2. And as growing up and seeing them and seeing they had a very positive interaction with one another. I never saw any animosity between them, but in coming to know each of them as people, you tend to think, that wasn't going to work out. Is that you see the different personalities and you see the different spaces, and it's like, yeah, they made a good choice. So even in growing up and in now looking at the 2 of them as an adult, thinking, okay, yeah, I see why that mightn't have been able to work out with the 2 of them. So it may take until adulthood to get to that space of realization. It may just be a normal version of what their family is for some children. For some children, it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, this is how my life is. Other children may have a little bit more of a tough time in navigating this space. So each child is different, each family is different, each experience is different, but ultimately it's possible that kids could realize that, yeah, this is probably a good thing.
And you spoke about getting help for children as well. And I just wanted to ask, is there a certain age from which that may be suggested, or how old the child may be when you say, okay, no, we need to give the person some help?
I'd answer this in two ways. Is that I think that it's important to understand what your child's baseline behavior is, no matter what their age is. Even kids as young as 2, 3, even infants, you can sense when there's something different with your child. Yeah. When it comes to kids who are, infancy, toddler, where, they really have minimal insight as to what's going on around them, then maybe, okay, their challenges, we could see how their baseline shifts and if it is they're having a tougher time. When it comes to children who are a little bit older, going into the 3s to 5s, is that sometimes when dealing with difficult transitions or when witnessing areas of violence and abuse and just overall discomfort, is that there are spaces of red flags of being able to notice if there's something that they need help with processing. So if, for example, your child was generally a calm child, yes, they'd have tantrums every now and then, like every child does, but they're a little bit more irritable, they're more aggressive in their play, everything seems to be a problem, they are maybe withdrawing from interacting or playing with other friends that they used to enjoy playing with or other family members, then that's a sign that they might need a little bit of help in managing. And that goes for kids as they get older as well. You see these signs of just overall irritability, moodiness. Not all the time would sadness come out in kids as only tearfulness, but this increased aggression, these changes in eating patterns, changes in sleeping patterns. If it is that you had a child who was previously potty trained, but now you find themselves having trouble with toileting and those kind of things. All of those are flags and signs that they're going through something that's a little bit too difficult for them. If it is that, because some of these things are very well able to be managed by parents in terms of noticing these challenges and being able to meet them where they are, let them talk about it in a safe way, where you're not having big reactions as we're trying to help the child have their reactions, then that's fine. But if it is that you are struggling yourself as a parent, that it's hard for you to hear and to deal with some of these behaviors without getting overwhelmed yourself, then that's a sign that that they might need a little bit more support. And there are psychologists and therapists who are trained with being able to treat children as young as 3 through different play therapy activities. It's not necessarily sit down on the couch and talk about your problems, but it's resolving issues through play, through art, through interaction, and those kind of things. So there are those who are specialized with that age group, and with different age groups as you go older as well.
You are specialized in that as well?
I generally work with kids who are 8 and over.
Okay.
But there are those who see kids who are younger as well.
Okay. I just wanted to point that out for anyone who's listening. And I did want to comment on what you said too, because I actually experienced piece of what you were saying with my separation. There was some regression in the potty training, but I just kept with her, and I kind of left her to being on her own beat, so to speak, and just letting her know I'm there for her. But I do know of other kids, like one of my friends, she was telling me her child, well, he's much older, maybe 7. He doesn't listen. And I was telling her, don't get angry with him. Try to understand where he's coming from too, because she's going through a divorce as well. And I was trying to explain to her that sometimes it's hard for them too, but they don't know how to say, well, mommy, this is hard for me too. So I'm glad that you spoke about those things. So hopefully persons who are listening, if you are seeing those, if you're going through separation, divorce, and you are seeing those signs in your kids, it may be a good idea to at least get them some help, because they have emotions just like us.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we're talking about exiting an abusive relationship now, because one of my big things in doing this series is letting women or men, the need for a safe exit, and the need to have that exit plan and persons around you supporting you. Because from what I've read, and you could comment on this, the point and time which a woman decides she's going to leave is usually the point in time when her life is in the greatest danger. Right? So you could comment on that, and then also let us know, how can you exit safely from an abusive relationship?
Yeah. So the space of leaving is really one of the toughest decisions that persons who are being abused have to face, because there's such a strong tie and connection that they have with this person. And one of the biggest questions that friends and family and support people might have is, well, why don't you just leave? And then, they get angry, or they try to forcibly make the person leave, or things like that, or kind of throw their hands up in the air and think, well, that's you, you're choosing to stay there, I'm not going to help. But in a very real way, and I think it's really important for family members and support people to understand that you can't make that decision for them. And if it is that you are making that decision for the other person, then you are in fact taking away their right to choose, and their freedom and their autonomy and all of these things that are so hard for them to build up in the first place because of what they've been through. When women and men are in such a space of abuse, they really don't believe that there's any other option. And it's in that space, in that transition from victim to survivor, like we were talking about in this last space, is when the person knows that they do have agency, there are other options, and there are spaces for them to be able to act in a safe way to get out of the relationship. And you're very right, is that this space of deciding to leave often is a trigger for this abusive partner, because you are shattering what the norm for them is. And you're taking away, quote unquote, their normalcy, their ways of coping with life's difficult situations and whatnot. And oftentimes that is when the physical aggression, violence, and aggressive behaviors go up, is when there's this decision to leave. So that's why it's so important for survivors to have a plan and a strategy for leaving. Thinking in a very real way when we have couples who are in these situations, there's so many things in their life that are intertwined. Maybe their finances, maybe their whatever else it is that is intertwined. So it's about being able to disconnect in a slow way, in a way that can go unnoticed. If it is that you are financially dependent on the other party, making sure that you have a plan of how you can sustain yourself when you move independently. Do you have somewhere that you can go that is going to be safe? Do you have a support network who'd be able to help you as you get back on your feet? Thinking about being able to contact those areas of support and let them know what your plan of action looks like. Thinking if it is that in cases of physical abuse and whatnot, if you're afraid for the level of violence that might occur with this decision, thinking about ways to ensure your safety as you're deciding to leave. Do I need to get authorities involved? Do I need to go somewhere that this person doesn't know how to find me? And considering those steps in the process of leaving. If it is that you have made this decision to leaving in a quick way, maybe waiting for them to not be physically in the house when it is you're deciding to leave, having support around you so that you can make this transition in a quick way. If it is that you slowly maybe putting things together as you know that the time that you want to leave is coming closer, but having those things in mind, being able to do it in a way that's smart and effective for you, understanding what your situation is, what your resources are. And that's another space of help too, is that if you have no idea of how you even want to start to plan to leave, maybe seeking some professional advice as well in making a tailored exit strategy for yourself, because some of these things that I talked about, they're general, really thinking about specifics of how you can make this happen in a safe way for yourself. And then knowing that you actually do. And I think this is probably this first step, is that you actually do have the capacity and the agency to decide to leave and put this plan into practice as well.
Yeah, so it's so much and so difficult for, especially when you love the person, right, to decide to leave. And sometimes we go through it, we run through the fire, and then we go back. And I just wanted to ask you to just comment on that, because in society, we have a tendency to judge going back. And I have even had in 2 of the episodes I did, the woman went back before exiting completely. And I even know of persons who went through divorce. So in the other 2 episodes, they were just separated and they went back. But I know of persons who even went through divorce and wanted to go back to this abusive relationship. So would you be able to comment a little bit on that psychologically, what happens there in the mind?
Yeah. And you see that cycle of going back, that is so common. It isn't the rarity at all. Where it is that you made this decision, you've acted on your decision, but yet you go back. And it comes back to this idea of this cycle of abuse, is that when it is that you make that stand and you leave, that's when the honeymoon period kind of starts, is that you kind of, start to remember all of these good times. The perpetrator is likely putting their best foot forward and, saying all of the things that you want to hear and demonstrating different behaviors that you wish that they would have done when you were in the relationship. So that is a very real thing. And you see that intimacy that really created the possibility for this abuse is what creates the possibility for going back as well. Sometimes it's that life is just generally too much for the person to handle on their own, be it for financial reasons or other emotional challenges or lack of support, or, that space is that they find that they miss that sense of grounding that they had when they were in that relationship. So it's, again, it isn't uncommon, and it is all part of this cycle of what abuse is that keeps women back. And it's really important for persons who are in that helping space to understand that cycle and to not degrade or blame or give up if persons do decide to go back into that relationship, because it's not that they are, just throwing all of the work that you would have done to support them and leaving out the window, but it's about letting them know that no matter what your decision is, it's letting them know that they do have that right to choose. And you see, that right to choose and that right to autonomy, that is the skill that they need to be able to make this stance, to be able to once and for all leave the relationship.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you make about having that skill and that autonomy, that will to leave, because like for me, I could encourage you all that I want, but if you leave because of me, it's not going to be sustainable. You have to want it for yourself. Mm-hmm. And even if you are in that situation where you left and you went back and you're thinking, oh my God, why did I do this? Know that you can leave again. And that's why it's so important for us as friends to support, because I had one survivor say she left and she wanted to leave a second time. And she said, well, she felt she couldn't go back to her family because they would say, but you went back in the same situation. But as friends, we have to understand that it's so much more than just going back in that situation. It's so much more mentally that the person has to deal with, and to try to be there if you're genuinely in friendship, and let them know that they have you as an option, as opposed to they have nowhere to go the second time.
Yeah.
So,
or the third, or the fourth,
or the
whatever
third,
time it is. Yeah.
Yeah, because it is. I don't think, us on the outside, I'm saying us, but persons on the outside, sometimes they really don't understand how hard it is to come out of that, especially if you grow up thinking it's normal. We will fight, but I go back. Okay. And so now we have, when the person is leaving now. Sometimes I'll just say the partner gets so aggressive in that rage that they end up ending your life and theirs. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that murder, suicide sort of behavior. I actually had a friend of a friend who, unfortunately, her life ended like that. And in Trinidad, we see it every now and then. So could you explain a little bit about that?
And you see, when we have these murder-suicide situations, it's every case is different, and every experience of loss is different. So it's really difficult to speak to such a heavy space. But what is generally going on when we do have these murder-suicide behaviors is this very ingrained belief of the perpetrator that the victim's personhood is theirs and theirs alone. And if I can't have you, no one can. And it's this space and this rage that's sometimes planned, sometimes not, sometimes just in a fit of rage that it happens, and then the remorse and the guilt that comes out of it is too much for them to bear. But in very, very, very much so is that there are psychological concerns in the individual prior, in the perpetrator prior. And that's why I believe it's so important for us as a society to stop normalizing certain behaviors, stop normalizing this belief that, he had a couple of beers, he had a couple of drinks, that's all right. That idea that, oh gosh, that's a domestic situation over there, I'm not going to get involved with that. Because all of those are things that not necessarily perpetuate this behavior, but cause this behavior to escalate to that point, is that there's no intervention in that slow build of these problematic behaviors. And I think that that's where, in a very real way, our men have such a special place in being able to stand up and point out these misbehaviors as they happen. Because when we have, now I'm going into this space of the abusive partner being a man, because in a lot of these murder-suicide behaviors, that's generally the space. And when we have men who are abusive in that space, having another woman or two women sitting here talking about abuse or calling them out on things has less value than if one of their partners call them out, or if another man stands up and says, hey, that's not how men act and how men behave. This isn't normal. You need to get some help. And you see, it's this space of our men who now have this position of being able to advocate against gender-based violence, is that you see that calling out behavior, that shifting of conversation to be able to really identify things as problematic and changing that level of discussion. Because oftentimes, you see things and you just don't talk about it. You see things and you just kind of let it pass. Every, you have a group of men, there's probably one who acts in less desirable ways toward women, but it's kind of joked off. So really being able to understand the role that our men have in being able to advocate against gender-based violence and abuse in that kind of way too.
Yeah, that is so important what you said, for men to recognize it, and even to let them know that it's okay to be apologetic, or it's okay that you are hurt and you seek out ways to help yourself, as opposed to let the rage and remorse and stuff, build inside you.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think more as I do this series, I see so much more room for healing and compassion for men as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because they, as you said in the last episode, they, from the whole coming down from that colonial period, it really isn't that space of acceptance for men reaching out or seeking
Mm-hmm.
help.
Mm-hmm.
And it is really just coming down into that space and thinking, to exist, I need to be this sort of rigid kind of person, and
Mm-hmm.
she is my property, I own her. So there's so much more room for discussion, and I'm glad that you brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to flip it a little bit, because even though this series, I language it towards women, because I am a woman and I understand from that point of view, again, as I do this series, and because I am more aware of what abuse is, I see it more clearly now on the flip side, how a woman can abuse a man. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about that on the flip side, the things that women do that really are abusive and not just shenanigans, with respect to a man, and if a man is in this situation, how he can deal with it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because again, people tend to think that when we're talking about abuse, it's the men being the abusive ones, and can't see how women can be abusive too. Is that you think, oh, okay, well, it's a small woman compared to a bigger man. She can't actually hurt him. She can't physically overpower him or whatnot. That's the perception and the belief. But just because a woman can't, or maybe they can, women are strong too, but maybe if a woman is not going to cause as much damage to a man, it's okay if she punches him, or it's okay if she slaps him, or things like that. And you see it, is that you see women, playfully, not playfully, aggressively, whatnot, hitting men. And it's about breaking that preconception that it's okay for a woman to hit a man. Is that we're raised, if you think about how he speaks to little boys, it's like, you can't pull girls' hair, you can't hit girls, you can't do that. But even the conversation is that nobody should be allowed to hit anybody else. And you see it again so often, even in media in general. You see this almost normalized behavior of a woman shouting and in a guy's face, or being verbally aggressive, calling men dogs. The sentence women like to say, "Oh, men are dogs," and things like that. Is if it is that you're saying things that are intentionally degrading to another person, that counts as abuse. If it is, even if you don't think that it's hurting them, even if you think, man, he reacting to it, so he mustn't be hurt, it's a message that's being played and a narrative that's being said that sets the stage to make men feel less empowered. If it is, we're thinking about financial abuse, is that women can be financially abusive towards men. It's not necessarily who's the, traditionally you think men as being the earners. Women can be the earners too. And we see very high achieving women who are, with partners who may not be achieving as much as they are, and or earning as much as they are. And you see that financial abuse of not being able to spend freely, or not having equitable recreation, or expectations of financial gain. And even if, let's say, it's the opposite way, where the man is the financial breadwinner of the family and whatnot, there is a lot of space where women can be abusive in that, right, too, is the space of expecting that all of the earnings go toward household expenses, and you have to tend to me and tend to the children, and there's little to nothing left over for you to be able to spend as you want, or this expectation that the woman is allowed to have her own separate bank account, but the man, you can't. You have to, everything that you earn has to go into this joint space. Not saying that all relationships have to have joint spaces, but just that expectation that what you earn is ours, what I earn is mine. That kind of duality too. And there's so many different spaces where we can talk about instances where women can be abusive towards men, and just understanding. And I think it's the space of this narrative shift that allows men to realize that, that this isn't right. I don't feel happy and healthy in this relationship. And being able to speak more about that, and having more conversations about the emotional well-being of our men in relationships too. Because thinking that just because it's not physically causing harm, emotionally it could be causing harm too. And then sometimes you hear of these stories where, men act in an uncharacteristically aggressive way. It's very often sometimes related to this pent up, these pent up feelings that they may have. So a lot to talk about, a lot of discussion to have, but it's a very important door to open when thinking about abuse, is that men can be abused too.
Yeah, and I will actually go back to how you opened the first episode, episode 8, where you spoke about abuse, and you said, once you are not feeling yourself and you don't feel that you could be yourself around this person, you are being abused. And from what you just said, it came back to that, whether you're a man or a woman, once you have that feeling of the reduction in the self-confidence and the battering. Mm-hmm. And so it may just be on a mental level for a man, but it is abuse. And even you spoke about the hit, like a woman could hit a man. And just for the benefit of our viewers, according to the Domestic Violence Act, one act, mm-hmm. one physical act is abuse. So if you hit your partner once, you have abused him. Mm-hmm. So it's just things for us to keep in mind as we try. I'm just trying to bring these things to the forefront of our minds, so we are more aware of how we act in our relationships. So, okay. We had a question from the last time. So we can do the question. We're almost at time. If you're watching, don't worry, we're almost there. Okay, so this question is, my daughter is studying abroad at university, staying by her uncle and aunt. The uncle made inappropriate advances towards her and used his position in the household to get her to go on errands with him, during which inappropriate suggestions were made. The family up there consistently complained that my daughter was misbehaving and giving trouble. They accused her of things as not dressing appropriately if she was wearing a vest or a short pants in the house, but my daughter never gave me any trouble living here. One night, my daughter could not take it anymore, packed up her things and went by another aunt. The family up there is now accusing her of breaking up the family. She's trying to get a job to settle and move out. What can I do to help my daughter?
And I think this comes to this idea of being there to be able to support her emotionally. Is that it sounds like if the family who is physically with her aren't acknowledging the severity of what she's experiencing, or maybe minimizing her complaints or explaining away the discomfort that she has in that environment. So being there to support her emotionally, letting her know that she is doing the right thing. If she's not feeling safe and comfortable in a space, you are doing the right thing to remove yourself from that situation. It's not your daughter or anybody's role to keep a family together for the sake of appearances or anything, whatever reasons it is that they might have behind insisting that the family is kept together. It's not her role to tend to that. It's her role to keep herself safe and to continue to act in a way that's going to ensure that she's safe. So you see that moral support, that emotional support, letting her know, reinforcing the idea that she's making the right decision. And it's not about, so let's say, God forbid, she is acting up or she is being inappropriate or, whatever it is that behaviors like that don't come out of nowhere. And the same way we were talking about knowing your child's baseline is that if there's a dramatic shift in behavior, it means that there's something more going on. And if she needs to remove herself from that space, support her with that. And coming down to just even the idea of if it's within your space to be able to support her financially as well, to reinforce this idea that it's okay for you to move, encouraging and maybe helping with the job search and being able to gain that financial independence necessary for her to be able to live on her own, or being able to help her with maybe finding other resources that she'd be able to lean on to ensure her safety. But in all of that, the most important part, at least for me, is this space of reinforcing that she's making the right decision to keep herself safe.
Wow, thank you so much for that. People really underestimate how much a therapist could help you. And there is this stigma about if you go to a therapist, you're crazy, which is not true. And I actually found, I went through therapy last year. I was becoming very anxious about certain things in my life. But when I went to therapy, it was like the best thing ever. It was like all the things, because I don't talk. I mean, I'm introverted, but all the things that I was thinking of for years, I finally actually had someone say, I can't remember how she said it, but basically that, no, it's okay for you to be feeling this. And yes, that would have made you feel that way. So it's like my feelings were validated from an independent person who's not biased towards me. So I know it wasn't because the person loves me, because this is a professional person. And since then, I've been trying to advocate for persons, man or woman, to seek help if you need it. It is an investment, but it is so completely worth it. So as we end, Denise, I would like you to just talk about how a therapist can help you in going through whatever you're going through, or even if you're just at a point in life where you need to stop, reset, figure out what happened, where can I go next? If you could just talk a little bit about how a therapist can help.
And I think one of the most important things that I value when I'm doing therapy with somebody is just this inherent knowledge that listening and giving somebody good attention is sometimes all they need. The biggest thing as well is when you have thoughts or plans or ideas in your mind, it all just seems arbitrary, overwhelming, because it's just disorganized thoughts that are, pervasive. You keep thinking the same thing over and over. You feel stuck. You feel isolated. You feel like nobody gets what you're going through. But when you start to put words to your experience, it clicks together in a way that sometimes I hear people say, wow, I just said that about myself. I didn't even realize I thought that about X situation. And putting words into it really does help to make it make more sense. Understanding that the story that you're telling yourself in your mind becomes your reality. And sometimes that story it has glitches. It has things that aren't necessarily true, but you wholly believe it to be true, and you're living your life in this way that really believes this narrative. And when you sit with an independent person who, like you're saying, is that they're objective, is that when you're reflecting it to them, when you're telling what it is that you're saying, they're able to pick up these inconsistencies, able to realize these negative perceptions that you might have for yourself and point it out in a way that you can understand and hear and change. When you talk to people and they're like, oh yeah, I have a friend, I don't need therapy, I could just talk to my friend. But talking to a therapist isn't talking to a friend. Talking to a therapist is talking to somebody who is trained to be able to pick apart some of these inconsistencies and really create this plan of treatment for you in a way that's going to help you along the path that you need to be on. So whether or not it's like these bigger issues like domestic abuse or whatnot, or just phase of life challenges, having difficulties with making decisions, or having overwhelming moods that you just can't seem to shape or, step away from, all of that falls under the space of how therapy can help. It's not just for quote unquote mad people, it's for anybody. Anybody could really benefit from talking to a therapist.
Yeah, because when I went, it wasn't for abuse or anything like that. It was really for just anxiety, which is like a phase of life thing for what I was going through at that point in time. But even through these sessions, so many other things came out that I didn't even know were affecting me, and which is why I'm really valuable and grateful to the therapist, because if I didn't go, sometimes we say you go for one thing, but well, if you're spiritual, God has a reason that you're going that you may not know about. So I really went for the anxiety, but I got so much more out of it, down to better ways to raise my daughter, because I'm interested in raising her differently to how I was raised. So going through all of that, and even in talking to friends. So I have friends, I may not have much, but I do have close friends. But the thing for me is that a friend gives you advice based on their perceptions and experiences, as opposed to a therapist who will give you advice based on, professional understanding, psychological understanding, how the brain is made up. This experience leads to that, which a friend, as much as they love you, they really can't give you that because they're not trained to give you that. And that is a real benefit that I got from it, because even within my marriage, I got a lot of advice, but all the advice was from the place that person was comfortable in, and that the place that person understood, and it didn't really take into account everything that was going on No offense to anybody who is my friend. It's just that, they weren't in that profession, didn't study it professionally to be able to help you really with like the coping behaviors. That was a really big thing for me, learning how to cope, learning how to set boundaries, something I never ever did. So all of those things are really big things for me when I started therapy. And I encourage anyone, if you are thinking, did you want to say something? Oh, I thought you raised your hand. Anyone who is thinking about it or hesitating about it, at least go for one session and see how it could help you within your life, get you on your journey to living as mentally free as possible. So as we close, Denise, do you have any closing remarks or anything you want to say before we close?
I just want to reinforce everything that you just said, because my hand gesture that you said was me being excited and agreeing with everything. Is just that it's this space of realizing that there is support and help, realizing that friends come from their hearts. They come from, wanting to do what's going to stop you from feeling the overwhelming way that you feel. And it is a different skill set that a therapist comes with. And I really want to genuinely thank you for just all of this advocacy and awareness and discussion, the space for discussion that you're creating, because it's so needed. It's raising awareness to things that persons might not have access to, and ideas and different ways of seeing. And I really want to applaud you for the work that you're doing as well.
Of course, thank you so much. And I am so beyond grateful for you, for your contribution, for everything that you brought. I had no idea that, the conversations would go this way. I don't really talk, but, and I actually got trouble getting a therapist, but, I always believe in every no you get is leading you to the perfect yes. And you were definitely by far my most perfect yes. I mean, you agreed, even though we didn't really keep in touch, and Denise is not really my friend. I just know her through someone at work. But as soon as I called her, she agreed, and the contribution she has made is so valuable to this series, introducing things that I never even spoke about before. Like in this session, she spoke about the green flags. I haven't never spoken about that. And in the sessions before, she spoke about the battering and the spiritual abuse. And there are many other things which probably just not coming to my head. But I really, from the bottom of my heart, Denise, I sincerely thank you. And if there's anything I could ever do for you, even if you just want to come to a Zumba class, let me know.
I am the most uncoordinated person in the history of coordination. So I will come and be in the background of your Zumba class.
Come on here.
But thank you.
Yes, and thank you too. So for everyone watching, I am going to have Denise's information at the end of the episode. So if you would like to contact her through her website, please feel free to do so. Also, if you are in a domestically abusive situation, the number to call is 800-SAVE. Thank you everyone for watching. I wish you guys the best, and I will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.